There is a mode of training that is highly effective for women over the age of 40, 50, and beyond. It's called periodization. Yes, that big word is simply meaning that there are certain types of exercise and even nutrition fundamentals that we follow for a period of time before switching it up. So, in other words, if we're looking at a monthly cycle or a 4-week cycle, we're talking about training a little bit differently each and every week. And the advantage to this is that it can help a woman in perimenopause, the years leading up to menopause, and menopause to reduce body fat, increase lean muscle without zapping her energy or putting her at risk for injury. Hi, my name is Carol Cavino. I'm an online fitness coach for women over the age of 40 who are experiencing perimenopausal and menopausal hormonal symptoms. I help these ladies to lose the body fat for good and to tone and strengthen their bodies. So let's get into periodization. That is a mouthful, isn't it? And it sounds very complex. But let me give you a little bit of a definition. What it is the manipulation of training variables to optimize performance, prevent overtraining, see progress, which we want, and it includes adjustments in how long you exercise, the load, so how heavy weights are, and the volume, how many sets or reps that you do, even the type of exercise that you do. It's planned out over a period of time, and it's been used quite a bit by athletes in particular to maximize performance. So, when I used to be a marathon runner in my 40s, I had times where I would back off my training and times where I would advance my training as I prepared for a marathon. This would be an example of periodization. So I would follow a schedule, and each week I would increase intensity, and then I would have a deload week, typically week 4, and by deload, what I meant is I would back off on the intensity and the volume, so the amount of miles I was running and how fast I was running. So it was more like recovery runs where I wasn't looking at time and not so much at distance, but just to continue to train during that week where I back it off. Then I would begin the progress again of progressing each and every week with intensity. Now, as I neared the marathon, I had a deload month where I increased intensity and then gradually brought it down as I got closer to the marathon so that on the day of the marathon, I would not be too fatigued or injured. So, this has been done quite a bit with athletes, bodybuilders. I used something similar when I was getting ready to compete in bikini bodybuilding. So, having times where you lifted more weight and times where you backed it off, they called it deload week. So, how can this benefit women over the age of 40? So, what we're going to actually look at is cycling, which is beneficial if a woman is still cycling within her 40s, and chances are she is. She needs a different approach with each and every stage of her cycle. And I'm going to walk you through this and suggestions for this and how you can use this even if you're not still cycling. So, what's being encouraged now for women in menopause with fitness is to follow the cycle of the moon. And I know that sounds silly, but there's some merit in it because what it does is by having times that you push and having times that you back off, as a menopausal woman, it's going to help with your energy levels. And it's also going to help to prevent injury because if we're continually pushing, then chances are we're putting a lot of load and stress on our joints. And let's face it, as we move through the stages of life as women, our joints simply don't take the pounding that they did say in our 20s and 30s. Not that that was ever a good idea, but our bodies just don't recover as quickly. I'm 61 years old, and at this age, I find that I do need to have active recovery. So I have harder days of lifting and days where I back it off. So we're going to look at how to optimize a 28-day cycle. So you could do this with a monthly cycle. And I'm going to give you 4 one-week workout and even a little bit of nutrition routine. So you'll be doing something different each week. The idea is to improve body composition. And by body composition, I simply mean the amount of fat or adipose tissue that we have on our body. We want less of that and more of the lean muscle. Something that happens in perimenopause is there are shifts in hormones. So there are times that a woman does not ovulate, times where she has higher estrogen than progesterone, and she can start to see problems with weight gain. The typical weight gain is around 5 pounds. And actually, a certain percentage of women in perimenopause will gain 12 plus pounds. She also is vulnerable to losing muscle, a situation called sarcopenia. And that's just a fancy word for age related muscle loss. And that tends to increase through perimenopause and even more so once a woman reaches menopause. So, by having a workout schedule that's doable, something that decreases the chance of injury, and doesn't completely wipe out your energy levels, which is a problem with perimenopause. Women in perimenopause are typically not sleeping as well due to these hormonal shifts. She's more vulnerable to stress and increases in the stress hormone cortisol. She's more prone to adrenal issues and adrenal dysfunction, causing fatigue and chronic fatigue. So, having a workout program that optimizes her results without putting undue stress on her body is essential. We have to understand that exercise affects our hormones. The amount of endurance exercise we do, endurance cardio, those would be longer runs like what I did back in the day when I ran marathons. The amount of calories. So, if a woman is doing too much endurance activity, say running lots of miles, not eating enough carbohydrates, maybe potentially not having enough calories, and the timing of her carbohydrates is not right for her level of activity, so it's not in alignment, this can affect her hormones negatively. And hormones affect blood sugar levels. In perimenopause, we tend to start to have a problem with the regulation of blood glucose, blood sugar levels, meaning levels can spike higher and stay higher for longer periods of time. We can start to have a problem with the hormone insulin. Our bones can be negatively affected as estrogen diminishes. Our muscle can be negatively affected as estrogen, testosterone, and growth hormone go down. And muscle growth depends on hormones such as cortisol. If we are experiencing high cortisol levels, chronic high cortisol levels when we're under stress, this will make it difficult to reduce body fat and difficult to increase muscle. Muscle growth also depends on the hormone insulin. When we're releasing insulin, we are not burning fat. So, just to clarify, insulin is the hormone that comes in to clean up the mess after blood sugar spikes when we eat. And blood glucose levels go up. That's normal. It's going to go up after a meal or a snack, anything that we eat. Insulin comes in, and its job is to shuttle the blood sugar to the cells and to the muscles where it can be used and out of the bloodstream. Problems occur when insulin cannot do its job or our body ceases to recognize insulin. We become insulin resistant. We want to be insulin sensitive. When we're insulin resistant, it's pouring in, blood glucose levels are high, but insulin is not being recognized by our bodies. The result is fat storage and difficulty putting on muscle. Fat loss is greatly affected by insulin, as I mentioned. So, having a workout routine that honors where you are at with your hormone levels and your stage of life is critical. We cannot do what we did in our 20s, 30s. And when you reach 50s and 60s, you look back and say, I can't do what I did in my early 40s. Does it mean we're less intense or that we exercise less? No, it doesn't mean that we give up intensity of exercise. And in fact, I would argue that we need it even more. However, we need to work out smarter, not necessarily longer. So let's look at how this might be used, this periodization. And what we're going to do is follow lunar moon cycles if you're no longer cycling. If you are cycling, you can follow your regular monthly cycle. This is going to go in conjunction with the circadian rhythms. That's why we're using the moon cycle. So, week one is menstruation. And estrogen and progesterone are very low. As a result, a woman will feel fatigue, bloated, have cravings. During this time, it is advised to do moderate lifting. So, a rep range of 10 to 15 reps, depending on how heavy the weights are. It's not a time to set a PR, a personal record with your weights. It's a time to honor your body. You lower your carbohydrates because your amount of lifting and activity should generally be lower. So you'll lower those carbohydrates down, make sure protein is high enough. For most women, it should be around 100 grams or more. I advise my clients to do 1 gram per pound of ideal body weight. That's ideal body weight or what you think you should be weighing. So if you've got, let's say, 20 pounds to lose, let's say you're 160 and you want to go to 140, you would set grams at 140 grams. But with that being said, if you are only eating, say, 50 grams, which is typical for most women, you will want to up your protein intake very slowly. Otherwise, you're going to have a lot of digestive issues. Week two is ovulation. At this point, testosterone and estrogen peak. And because estrogen is very high, you are more prone to injury. So ligaments become more lax when there's a lot of estrogen within your body. So you have to keep that in mind with your training. Yes, you feel good. You feel ready to go at this point. You've got that testosterone. You've got your mojo, your energy, your motivation, but concentrate on building and avoiding high impact activities. This isn't the time to do box jumps or any kind of crazy plyometrics. If you do that, you'll want to back that impact off because of the laxity in your joints. So you concentrate on building, lifting heavier. This will be 10 reps or less, so maybe around 6 to 10 reps. Low impact on your cardio because of the high estrogen. Higher protein, you want to take advantage of this building window, so you would up your protein. Now, if you're in menopause and you're not in ovulation, obviously, you will stimulate estrogen and testosterone through your lifting. So you're going to stimulate a hormonal response through your lifting. You're going to lift heavy during this week. You don't have to worry as much about the problems with estrogen, obviously, but you could back off your hit a little bit because this is part of allowing your body time to recover before you advance again. Just as I described with my running schedule, I had times I backed it off, times I moved it forward. This prevented injury. Week three is referred to as full moon or the luteal phase. If you are cycling, progesterone peaks on day 21 typically. It's going to vary with women. Women have variances within their cycles, but on an average, day 21. HIT can be more intense because estrogen has backed off, progesterone is a little higher. You're still feeling your mojo from week 2, so you're still feeling strong. Lifting should back down to a little more moderate. So it's not going to be light, it's not going to be high rep, but it's going to be more in the moderate range, say 10 to 12 reps, under 15 reps. Week 4 is the luteal phase, the last quarter. Progesterone is declining, and this is a time to decrease some of the intensity. So the HIT sessions you can still do, but you're going to do shorter ones. Let's say you've been doing a 25-minute session, you could back it off to a 15-minute session. Muscular endurance will be your focus. And now, by muscular endurance, it's kind of like the endurance exercise you do with cardio. You're going to do more volume, meaning more repetitions and more sets. Let's say you've been doing 3 to 4 sets of 8 reps or 10 reps. Maybe you do 3 sets of 20, or you do 4 sets of 15, or 5 sets of 12. You're increasing sets, reps, and volume. Weight is backed off a little bit. You're focusing more on time under tension. So by that I mean you're stimulating the muscle less with heavy lifting and more with time under tension. So an example would be a leg press where you're keeping in that three-quarter range. You're not coming all the way down. You're definitely not locking out at the top. You're keeping tension, constant tension on the muscles. And if you're doing 20 reps, it is going to be burning. You may need to increase calories during this time. Now, with menopause, you approach this a little bit differently. You do not need the increase in calories or carbs necessarily, but you can do the other aspects of this. So you can work on decreasing intensity, doing a little higher rep endurance. Yoga and walking with some cross training can be a great advantage. So you by cross training, I mean choose an activity you don't normally do. If you always do the stairs at the gym or you always do the treadmill, maybe choose an elliptical, a rower, or a bike. So you're switching it up a bit, putting in a little bit more yoga for flexibility and relaxation and stress relief, and adjusting your carb intake as needed. So, in late perimenopause, which is generally late 40s into the early 50s and into menopause and beyond, women tend to have less tolerance for carbohydrates. She still needs carbohydrates, so don't get me wrong. I'm definitely not anti-carb. I'm not ultra low carb even. I do believe we need carbs, but we have to be mindful of our metabolism and how flexible it is. By that I mean, are you able to burn fat for fuel and carbohydrate or sugar for fuel? You should be able to reach for both of these sources. The majority of Americans, 92 to 93%, the statistics say, are metabolically inflexible, meaning they never are able to tap into fat stores as fuel. They're sugar burners. So a sugar burner would look like this. They would eat a meal that had quite a few carbohydrates and maybe refined carbohydrates, sugary foods, things such as that, processed foods that spikes the glucose levels. That sharp spike leads to a crash down the other side. The crash down the other side causes this fatigue, this lull in energy. Our brains don't like that. Our brains are energy junkies. Our brains want that energy for the body. So we start to feel the need to eat again. We start to crave even more carbohydrates. This leads to more snacking, more frequency of eating. Same spike, go down the other side. So, with menopause, we want to work on being metabolically flexible and insulin sensitive. Remember how we talked about insulin resistance? We become more vulnerable to insulin resistance as women when we enter that menopausal threshold. We cross from perimenopause into menopause. We simply do not metabolize blood sugar as well. And I saw this in myself, even though I have a lot of muscle, my weight is at a good level, my body fat's at a good level. I wore CGM for a few months and I tested it with different foods, frequency of eating, and I saw it in myself. I do not tolerate the same amount of carbs that I even tolerated a decade or 2 decades ago. I need to manage that. I'm not ultra low carb. I have carbohydrates. I need them, but I am cognizant of how many I eat and when I eat them. So I try to time my carbohydrates around my most active time of day. I typically don't start the day with carbohydrates because that can often start that blood sugar roller coaster. So, my breakfast, for instance, the first meal of the day, it might be a high well, it will be a high protein breakfast, but it might be something like eggs or an egg white omelet. It might be a big salad with lots of protein on top. It might be a protein shake where I put an extra scoop of protein in. So I'm getting 30 grams of protein instead of 20 grams of protein. And I might have a few low glycemic berries in there, but I'm definitely not reaching for the oatmeal like I used to. Then my second meal, I'm introducing some carbs. And it's typically around my workout time, my most active time of day. I do intermittent fasting anywhere from a 12 to a 16-hour window, and I toggle that switch as needed. If my energy is high, I've slept well, I'll do the 16-hour window. If I'm feeling not as energetic, then I'll move it back to a 12-hour window. But that first meal of the day, I have a meal that will stabilize my blood glucose levels and set the tone, so to speak, for the rest of the day. So important, that metabolic flexibility. So, once again, to wrap things up, having a periodization schedule that you go by is helpful not just for athletes, it's helpful for each and every one of us that exercises regularly. And it ensures that we have times where we push and we advance and we are seeing muscle growth and changes in our body, and times where we back it off. The times where you back things off a little bit, those rest periods are actually times of muscle growth. We are repairing and building muscle when we sleep. That's why sleep is so very important. And as we enter menopause, having times of rest and recovery become more critical. We can still be intense. Sometimes when I say rest and recovery, women take that to mean, oh, I should back completely off and it should be easy. No, we're not talking easy here. We challenge ourselves when it's time to challenge ourselves, and we pull it back when it's time to pull back. So, once again, the moon cycle, the reason for that is to move around the natural circadian rhythms. Cortisol, an interesting hormone, we need it. It's our stress hormone, our fight or flight, but it needs to be in balance. So, for example, it is higher in the morning. It's like our get up and go, our mojo, our cup of coffee. It's normal for it to be higher in the morning. Then it fluctuates as we move through the day, and as we approach the evening, it should be dropping down in anticipation of nighttime and sleep. What we often see are chronically high cortisol levels, often seen in women who are menopausal. Perimenopause, we can often see chronically low because of the lack of energy, the lack of good sleep, the hormonal fluctuations, and the stress level. This is often a generation called the sandwich generation, where we're caring for elderly parents at the same time we're working and caring for our kids. We're kind of sandwiched in between. It can be a very stressful time and put a lot of strain on the adrenals and cause adrenal dysfunction and low cortisol. We often can see dysregulation with cortisol levels throughout the day. So maybe it's low in the morning when it should be high, or high at night when it should be low. Very important to get these tested by a professional and talk about this with your medical practitioner. So if we're going by the rhythms, week 1, menstruation if you're still cycling, or the new moon if you're in menopause or through menopause. Remember, this is moderate lifting and lower impact cardio. Week 2, ovulation, testosterone, estrogen are peaking. We feel good, but estrogen can make us vulnerable to injuries in the joints because the joints become more lax. So if you are still cycling, you are looking at building, lifting heavy, but not doing hit workouts that are plyometric in nature. So you're not pounding the joints, you're being more careful in this area. If you're in menopause, you can still follow this same routine and stimulate testosterone through your lifting. Week 3, full moon or luteal phase. Progesterone peaks at day 21 in and around there if you're cycling. For menopausal women, once again, you can follow this routine of having more intense hits, pushing the hit intensity, and going back to moderate lifting. Moderate lifting. Week 4, luteal phase, last quarter. Decline of progesterone, increase in fatigue. This means we decrease intensity with the hit, shorter hit sessions, less intense. We concentrate on higher reps, more sets, more volume, a little bit lighter weight, muscular endurance as opposed to building. If you are a woman in menopause, you follow this exact same thing, giving your body a bit of a break. If you are cycling, you may need to look at your calories and carbs going up a little bit, depending on your age, stage of life, how far into perimenopause you are. If you are further into perimenopause, the late stages where you are very close to menopause, you're going to follow more of the menopausal woman's routine, which won't necessarily include upping the carbs and upping the calories. So I hope this was helpful. As always, I love to know what you think. So you can find me on Instagram at Carol Cavino Fitness. That's at Carol Cavino Fitness. It is the best way to interact with me. I try to answer every message and I would love to hear from you. Thank you so much for joining me. And until next time, bye for now.